Hello everybody and welcome to my Decorative Quilter 2's block of the month. This is block 7 of 12. It's a trapunto block and it was designed for you by Rita Gizzard and presented by myself, Mark Garretts, and I'm a National FLORIAN educator, and I have DJ on the line here. Can you hear me okay, DJ?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. We would normally have opened this with an intro from DJ with some slides about how to do the chat and thing, but we're having some technical problems back in Knoxville where DJ is, so we're not going to do that today. But I assume if you've been on these webinars, you know that you can, on the left in your little panel there, on the right in your little panel there, you can type in a question and just make sure you press send, and we have some of our support staff is on hand to answer those questions. Just keep in mind that the questions that they're going to answer today are questions about what we're talking about during the webinar, not general support questions. So if you have a general support question, please use the support options either through the software or from our website to submit a support ticket for those issues. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, this is our block of the month program. This is block 7 of 12, and it's a trapunto block. And I always like to show you what the block is going to look like before we get into the software and the construction details of the project. So this is what our block looks like. If you've been following along with blocks 1 through 6, you know our basic block is that edge fabric in the corner triangles there with the quilting in it, and then a base fabric in the middle that we've been decorating and doing some fun things with along the way. And this month, of course, we're going to do trapunto with it, and you can see we've got a flower design in there with some texture fill around the outside that's going to mat down our main batting so we have a nice contrast for our trapunto effect on the flower. So now that you've got a good idea of what it looks like, let's go ahead and get right into our webinar. I'm going to end this and I'm going to bring up my Total Quilter software. And some of the projects that we've done in the past, we've gone ahead and started with a blank screen with a blank design window, and then we started creating or loading in blocks or whatever. This time, and as we've done for the last 6 blocks, we are going to, instead of doing that, we're going to load in the basic block that we have been using all along. And to do that, what you want to do is come up here and click the Open a Design icon. You want to navigate to the November 2015 folder under My Decorative Quilter or MDQII Projects. That's in your FLORIAN Design Library. So this is the first month that we did it, and we created this basic block for the block of the month, or for BOM. You want to go ahead and load the WAF file, the WAF version. Don't load this quilted block 1 of 12. That was the completed block. You want to do this one. So what you want to do is select it and click Open, and that's going to open up that block for us here in our design window. Now this next thing I'm going to do, this is not necessary if you're working at home, but I'm going to do it today just so you can see it a little bit easier on your screen at home and in the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the 3D icon, and that gives us a realistic thread view. It just makes things a little bit bolder for us so it's a little easier to see what's going on. The next thing we want to do is we want to set up our work area to make sure that our desktops are all looking the same for this. To do that, what you want to do is look over here in the right-hand corner on your top ruler and make sure that you're in inches mode. Right-click on the ruler anywhere on it. Also, you can check inches if you're not. We have Show Grid on. You can have it on or off for this project. Really doesn't matter. If you have Snap to Grid, and if you have the new Total Quilter, you may have this new icon here, Snap to Anchors, or new menu item, Snap to Anchors. If you have that, you also want that off. So both of these want to be unchecked. And finally, come down and click Grid Settings. Now, in the printed instructions, we've told you to set your grid spacing up to 0.25 and 0.25 on the horizontal and the vertical. Turns out we aren't actually using the grid at all during this lesson, so it doesn't really matter what you have this set to. Similarly, it doesn't matter what you have the grid major to. But if you want to, go ahead and set it to 0.25 and 0.25. And I have my grid major set to 8 and 8. And so that means every 8 of these. So what that means is every 2 inches, I'm going to get a grid major line. And then go ahead and click OK to lock those settings in. And we'll continue on here. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in that flower design. That flower design is built into the software in what we call our embellishments. And they're located right here in this embellishments icon. So go ahead and click that. When you do that, you are going to get a window that opens up that shows you whatever folder of embellishments you were working in last. We're going to be using a flower, and I've been working in that flowers folder. So my flowers came up, but you may have one of the different folders that come up. If it does, go ahead and click flowers. And we're going to scroll down and we are going to look for flower 10A. So it's this one right here, flower 10A. So go ahead and click that. And that's going to bring it into our design window. Now, as you can see, it didn't bring it into the center, and it kind of offset it here. And it's really the wrong rotation and the wrong size. So we're going to fix all of that now. So what we want to do is we want to, first of all, align this to the center of this block. And since this block, when it opened up, was aligned to our center rulers, you can see that the center of the block is on 0 and 0. We're simply going to move this so it's also at 0, 0. And the way we're going to do that is with our alignment icon right here. So when you click that, you're going to get a little flyout menu with a lot of different alignment options. A lot of these will be grayed out because we don't have very many things selected. But what you want is this center to rulers icon right here. It's next to last one. So go ahead and click that, and you can see it's going to move our design right into the center and line it up. I'm going to double click my magnifying glass, which if you've been following along with me these last years, you know I love this shortcut. So when I double click it, that's an automatic zoom to fit. And I've done that so you can see what's going on a little bit easier. What we need to do now is we need to rotate this 45 degrees so that these points are up here like this. And to do that, we're going to use our rotate right 45 degree icon, which is right here. Now, if you're using MDQ or an older version of MDQ, you may only see 2 icons here, and they may not have little numbers on them. Those are still your rotate right 45 and your rotate left 45 degree icons. Just pick the rotate right 45 degree icon, which is this one right here, and click it once. If you are using the new Total Quilter with Quilt Builder, you will see some new 90 degree rotate icons that we've added in for Quilt Builder. So I'm going to go ahead and click that rotate right icon, and it's going to rotate it into position for us. And what we need to do now is we need to transform this so that it is the right size. So we're going to resize it. So we're going to come over to our Properties box, and I'm going to click on my Transform tab. Now this is right now in this particular version of the software that I'm using, there's a little tiny bug in it, and it's showing me actually the wrong size for this design. It was showing me the size before I rotated it. To get it to show the right size, all I need to do is come here and click Apply. So if yours doesn't show that 6.76 inches like mine does, just come here and click Apply, and then that will make everything okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to decrease the size of this numerically so it fits. Before we do that, I want you to make sure that Maintain Aspect Ratio is checked, and also that you are in inches mode here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the width, and I'm going to cursor over it, and I'm going to type in 4.5. And because I have Maintain Aspect Ratio checked, you notice that it's also going to change the height to the same height. And I'm going to click Apply. And when I do that, now my design is the proper size and it's properly rotated. So that completes this step. Now, when we bring in an embellishment actually consists of 2 different pieces. One is the actual stitches that we want to stitch out, and the other is an outline that goes around the outside of it. And that outline is very useful for doing things like outlining it or creating a hole in a bigger element so we can stipple around it, for example, which is exactly what we're going to do in this example. But this outline, the way it comes in, it's an artwork outline, so it won't actually stitch. And it's also built so that it's a little tiny bit bigger than the stitches that it surrounds, and that's on purpose. It's there so it has a nice little offset built in. But for this design, we actually don't want that offset. So if I come over here to my sequence view, you can see that I've got two elements, and they're both selected because they came in together. The first one is our artwork. So that's the outline. You can see it right here, the outline. And then these are our stitches, the last one here. So we don't want to adjust the stitches. What we want to do is adjust the outline. So in our sequence view, we're simply going to click it. So that's the only thing we have selected. Then we're going to come up back to our properties box and click the transform tab. And we want our width of this to be down just a little bit smaller than the default of 4.5 inches that we set it to. So I could come in and I could type a value in here, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to teach you something different. We're going to show you how to transform it using the percentage enlargement or reduction. And what we want to do is actually reduce this to 98% of the original value. So I could come in here and I could type in a 98, but you can also do it with these little up and down arrow keys. So I'm going to hover over the down arrow here by this, and I'm going to click it once and twice to go down to 98 because it was just a short distance. If I wanted to make a big change, it'd be simpler to type it in. But for little changes like this, using the down arrow is kind of cool. And you can see it changed both of them because, again, we still have maintain aspect ratio checked. And now I'm going to click apply. And remember that whatever changes you make here in your properties box, they don't happen over here until we click apply. So if you look real close, you can see that this outline is offset right here. Once I click apply, you'll see that it changes its size so it snugs right up to our stitches, which is exactly what we want. So what we need to do now is we need to create our stippling stitches. So in order to do that, we're going to reuse part of an element that's in a sequence view, and it's up at the top. So we're going to scroll our sequence view up to the top with our scroll bar here. And what you want to do is select the second element here. Okay, it's real hard to see, I know, but it's a very light blue diamond. It's actually the diamond that we use for the placement line for our fabric and our batting and things. So we're just going to reuse that. The way we're going to do that is we are going to make a copy of it. So I'm going to come over here to my copy icon, and I'm going to click copy, and then I'm going to click paste. And that is going to paste it down here at the bottom. So once we've done that, we actually need to move it. And where we want to move it to is above this item right here, above our old artwork. And when we move something in the sequence view, there's lots of different ways to move it, but we are going to move this one by clicking and dragging it. Now, if I want it to be below this square here or above this item, the way I do that is I click and drag it onto the top of what I want it to be below, and it'll automatically snap below it. So watch what happens when I do this. I'm going to click and drag it and drop it right on that square, and when I let off, it's going to end up right below it. So that could be a little confusing sometimes, but that's what we're going to do. Or that's the way it works, rather, and that's in fact what we did. Now these are stitches because that's the way they were in our original design, but we don't want them to be stitches for what we're about to do. We want it to be artwork. So to go back to artwork, one of the powerful things about the quilting software is that we can easily take any object like this and convert it back into artwork with our one-click wonder icons down here at the bottom. So this last one, this orange star, this takes a stitch element and converts it back into artwork. So I'm simply going to click it, and now instead of stitches, I have artwork here. Now what we're going to do is we are going to make a copy of our flower design. And so what I'm going to do, our outline of the flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that, and I am going to come up and I'm going to make a copy by clicking copy, and I'm going to click paste. And the reason that we're doing that is we're going to use this later, and we're going to use this right now, but we don't want to actually lose our artwork, so we're going to make a copy so we still have it around when we need it. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to take this triangle that, or excuse me, not triangle, but diamond that we did, and we are going to combine it with the artwork that we had originally. and we're going to create a brand new shape out of the two of them. Now, I've just selected my diamond. I know that's hard to see, but I've selected the diamond over here. Before I select the second item, I want you to look up here at this combine icon right here. Right now, it's not lit up because combine works to combine two or more objects into one. And since I only have one thing selected, there's nothing for it to combine right now. But if I select these two artwork objects, so I'm going to do that, and I apologize that you can't see me doing this, but I'm going to hold down the Control key on my keyboard and click the second item. So holding down Control on your keyboard, that allows you to select multiple items. So now I've got two selected, and when I did that, you can see that my combine icon is now lit up. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I know it's really hard to see here, but trust me, I've actually now combined these two items into one. And what I have is that diamond, but instead of just having a solid diamond, in the center of it, there's a hole that's been knocked out in the shape of my flower design. Now, to prove that that's really what's going on, since it's really hard to see in the sequence view here, even for me sitting in front of it, I'm going to click my fill right here in my artwork properties, and I'm going to click apply. And that's going to fill the shape in with that light blue color. And now you can see over here that what I've got is this diamond shape, and what's actually happening is that there's a hole in the middle of it in the shape of my flower. Now, you don't need to do the fill at home. I'm just showing you that so you can see what we've actually done to it. So I'm actually going to uncheck it and click apply again so it goes back to the way it'll look for you at home. What we're going to do now is we're going to fill this area, so the outside of the diamond all the way up to the edge of the hole, with a texture so that we can use that to matte down our batting so we have contrast between our batting and the extra batting that we're going to put in for our trapunto effect. And to do that, I'm going to come down to my one-click icons, and I'm going to click on texture. And I'm going to get a window that comes up and shows me all the available textures. Now, I want to let you know that this is a new feature in the latest version of My Decorative Quilter and also in Total Quilter, which I'm using. If you have the older version of My Decorative Quilter, you may instead simply get a default texture over here in your Properties box, and then you'll have to click the drop down and select the proper texture. I'll show you that in just a second. We're going to use texture number 253, so I'm just going to click it, and it's automatically going to take and fill in that area with the texture, and you can see that it did not go into anywhere where our flower is because it just went around the edges of the hole. Now, what I was talking about earlier, if you have the older version, you may see just a drop down here with the texture, so you'll have to click the drop down and select 253 and then click apply. But what we're going to do, once you've done that, we are going to change the size of this pattern because this is too big to really give us a nice contrast and a nice matting effect for our batting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a 7mm pattern size, leave your stitch length alone at 2.5, and click apply. And when I do that, you can see that now I've got a very nice tight texture fill in around there, and this is going to create a great trapunto effect for us. What we're going to do now is we're going to get some other elements ready to help us stitch this out. So we're going to put in some placement lines and other things to help us stitch out our trapunto. So what we want to do is come back to our sequence view here and click on this flower outline. And remember, this is the copy that we made, so now we're going to use it. And we are going to convert this into a run stitch. And this is going to show us where to place down our trapunto batting so that we make sure that this area gets covered. Right now this is still artwork, but we need it to be a run stitch so it actually stitches. Again, we're going to come way down here into our one-click icons. We're going to convert it into a run simply by clicking our run stitch icon down here, and now that's a run stitch. Now it's going to be in the same color as our fill stitch. We don't actually want that. We want it to be a different color. We're going to reuse color number 1 because that's what we've been using for some of our placement lines in the prior design. So what we want to do is we want to click on the light blue. So So I'm going to click on color number 1, which changes it color, and you can see in the sequence view, since it changed color, it now separated that element out from the prior one. And what we want to do is, since this is just a placement line, we don't really need our stitch length to be as tight as 3. So to get this to stitch a little faster, we're going to come and change our stitch length to 4 and click Apply. So now we've got our placement line for our trapunto effect. What we need to do now is we need to create our actual tack down and stitching line for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our artwork and select it, and we are just basically going to repeat the process that we just did by creating another run stitch by clicking our run icon down here in our one-click icons. And this time what we want is this to be a dark blue so that it changes colors on us. So we're using those color changes to stop the machine. So what we want is color number 3, which is a dark blue. So I'm going to come here to our design palette and click that. And now that is color number 3. Now this one is actually going to show. So we want this one to be a nice stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to our stitch properties. We're going to change from a single run to a bean stitch. And a bean is a repeating stitch. Leave your repeats at 3. Leave your stitch length at 3. And simply go ahead and click Apply. So that is going to create our stitches for us. We have a few more things we need to do. So we're going to scroll up in our sequence view, and we're going to click on this second item one more time. So again, this is stitches for placement, and we need to make another copy of this. So we're going to come up to our copy icon. We're going to click Copy, and then we're going to click Paste. And it's going to put a new one down at the bottom for us. And we are going to transform this one. So we're going to come up to our Transform tab, and we just want to make this a little bit smaller. We want to make it, instead of 5.7, we want to make it 5.4 inches. So again, maintain aspect ratio, and inches should already be checked. So we're going to come in here and we're going to type in 5.4. And you can notice that the bottom one changes. Go ahead and click Apply to lock that one in. And we're going to go ahead and leave all the stitch parts of this the way they are. What we need to do now is we've created all or most of the stitches that we need, but we need to change the order that they stitch in. Because we started with a block that was all in its own thing, we need to put some of our new stitches that we created in the middle of what was going on before. And we need to tighten up a few things. So we're going to do that by moving these stitches around over here in the sequence view. Now, since we've been working with the sequence view, some of our items are what we call expanded. So here's, for example, our texture fill, and you can see that it's got a little minus sign here, and we can see both the top element and the bottom element underneath it. The same with this run here. So to make this sequence view look a little bit nicer, we're going to collapse all those expanded items. Now I could come in here and I could do it one at a time, but I'm going to show you a shortcut for doing them all. And that is, take any item you want or click anywhere in the sequence view, just right click somewhere in the sequence view, and you will see that there's a menu that pops up, and one of your selections is Collapse All. And that's what we're going to click, and that's going to tighten up our sequence view for us. Didn't really change anything, just made it so all we see is the top level of all of those items. So in our process here, we've created a few artwork items that we don't need. They're actually left over from the original design. So what we're going to do is we are going to get rid of them just so our sequence view gets a little bit shorter. And we could go ahead and leave them in because they won't stitch, they wouldn't hurt anything. But we're going to get rid of them because we're going to move some stuff from the top to the bottom, and we'll just have less distance to move if we do this. So the two artwork items that we no longer need are this one right here, which is the light blue. That was our original outline with a hole in it. And when we change this into stitches, which are the stitches right here, this was our texture, we didn't actually get rid of the underlying artwork. It's one of the cool things about the quilting software is that it actually leaves the original artwork, makes a copy, and gives us our stitches. We use that a lot because it's nice to be able to go back to the artwork and use it for other things. And I didn't specifically point it out, but we actually have done that a few times already in this sequence of instructions. But now that we're done with it, we don't need them anymore. So we're going to select this one. Again, I'm going to hold down the control and select this artwork here, which was our original outline of the flower. So I'm going to hold down control and select that one. So I've got both of those items selected. And I'm going to come up to my scissors icon, my cut icon, and click that to get rid of them. Now what I'm going to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom, because these last elements that we did, these are our placement and tack downs and things for our batting and our flower and things, and they kind of need to go up at the front rather than stitched last. So we can use these to show us where to do things. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all three of the last three items. I'm going to come third from the bottom and click that. I'm going to do the same trick of holding down the control key and clicking the next to last one and finally the last one. Now I've got those all selected, and where I want to put them is I need to put them right below the first rotated square, which is this one right here. So it needs to come right in below right here. So again, remembering what you've learned earlier, to get it to come below this, I'm going to drag it and drop it right on top of this. So I'm going to scroll back down. As long as they're still selected, I can click on any one of them, and as long as I click and drag immediately, I can move them all as a block. And again, I'm going to drop them right here on this rotated square and let off the mouse. And now I've got all three items in that same order in the perfect place. What we need to do now is we need to get our stippling and our flower outline up closer to the beginning of the design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my flower, and I need to get this one to go right below the stitching we just did. So it's going to come right above the seam stitches here and right below this light blue stitch here. So again, I'm going to drag and drop right on top of that. So I'm going to click and drag it right on top and let off the mouse, and now that's in the proper position. And then I need this one here, the fill stitch. That one needs to go right above this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click that one, and I'm going to drag it again to the same place I just dragged the other one, which is that rotated square, and let off. And now this is going to stitch out our texture fill, and then it's going to stitch out the outline of the flower for us. So we just have one more thing we need to do to adjust this design before we're ready to save it and go on to stitching. And that is, we're going to come down to our sequence view, and we're going to select our flower. Now, if we look up here in our properties, we can see that this is a single run stitch. We'd prefer this to be a nice bean stitch because we want it to look thicker. And that's what happens when you use a bean stitch. It's like a run stitch, except you get 3 stitches in the same place you would have just 1 stitch for a normal run. So it gives us the effect of using a thicker thread, and it really highlights that. And we're going to do that here by changing from a single run to a bean stitch. Go ahead and leave your repeats at 3 and your stitch length at 3, and go ahead and click Apply. And then that completes all of what we need to do to get this block ready to stitch. Just a couple more steps we need to do, and that is we actually need to save the block. Now I want you to be careful here. Resist the urge to come right up here and click the Save icon. If you do that, you're going to overwrite the block, basic block for BOM, that we started with. We don't want to do that because guess what? We're going to use that block next month and the month after that and the month after that. And we want to keep this block intact. So if we just click Saved, we'd overwrite it. We don't want to do that, so what we're going to do instead is we're going to come up to our File menu and click it, and we're going to click Save As. And that's going to allow us to put it in a different place and save it with a different name. So I've still got my November 2015 folder because that's where I loaded this block. What I'm going to do is go find the May 2016 folder, which is the real-time month that we're doing this project in. So I'm going to click the up arrow here in my windows, and how this looks will vary a little bit depending on your windows. Sometimes you might have arrows over here. So I'm going to keep going up until I find my MDQ project master folder, and then I'm going to find my May folder. So I'm going to double click that to open that. Here's my May 2016 project folder, and you can see that I've got a Trapunto block 7 of 12. So that's what we want to call this. One we've already given to you as part of the download. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a different name. So I'm going to backspace over this, and I'm going to type in my Trapunto block 7 of 12 to differentiate it from the one that we gave you. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And you always want to save that WAF format. You notice that I didn't change the format. You can see that now this is my Trapunto block 7 of 12. The only remaining thing we need to do is we need to save this as a stitch file so we can actually stitch it out. And we need to save that in our machine format. So what I'm going to do is click File, Save As one more time. I've already got the file name already pre-selected for me. So what I need to do is click the drop down here and select a format. So let me just select the Brother Baby Lock format PES version 9 and click Save, and that will save that machine file. So now all I need to do is put that file, say, on a USB stick and take it over to my machine and stitch it out. So that completes the software section of our project for this month. I'm going to go ahead and start up my PowerPoint again so that we can get to the construction details. Now you've seen this slide already, so I'm just going to skip that. Again, this is what our block is going to look like. So you've seen that already. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we require for this project. The materials for this month's block are as follows. You're going to need some FLORIAN quilted soft bamboo cotton blend batting or FLORIAN embroidery batting. Either one will work for this. You're going to need some FLORIAN quilted soft polyester batting. This is going to be for our Trapunto, our raised Trapunto effect. You do not want to substitute this batting because we're going to be using a very special technique to cut away our batting, and then we're actually going to melt it away with the FLORIAN Heatcraft tool. You want to make sure that this is your FLORIAN quilted soft polyester batting to ensure that you get the optimal results. You're going to need some FLORIAN nylon no-show mesh stabilizer. It can be any color, and it wants to be the non-fusible. You're going to need some FLORIAN water-soluble topping. You're going to need some cotton thread, and I just want to let you know that this cotton thread here, this is recommended, but it's not strictly necessary. We're going to be using this cotton thread as the tack down for our Trapunto effect, and then we're going to be getting our Heatcraft tool right up against the edge of it. If we use cotton, we won't burn the thread. If we use poly, there's a chance that we might melt the thread. If you melt it a little bit, it's not the end of the world. So if you don't want to go out and get cotton thread, if you don't have any, don't worry about it. You can use poly, but we do recommend that you use the cotton. Next, you're going to need some embroidery and bobbin thread. You want embroidery top thread that matches the colors that work with your fabric. And you'll need some R&K embroidery perfection tape. That's the pink tape that we all know and love. Like I mentioned earlier, you'll need the FLORIAN Heatcraft tool. You want to put the fine tip on it, so the nice pointy tip or the curved pointy tip, either one you feel more comfortable with. And then you want to have a minimum 6-inch by 6-inch or 150 millimeter by 150 millimeter hoop size. For the fabric for this month's block, you're going to need some batting. We talked about that. You're going to need two types. For the base batting, you're going to need 4 5.5-inch squares. So that's going to be your embroidery batting or your cotton bamboo batting blend. For the Trapunto batting, again, you're going to need 12 5-inch squares of the polyester batting, and 12 seems like a lot, but it's going to give us a nice puffy Trapunto effect. For fabric A, that's going to be your fabric for the main diamond in the center. You're going to need 4 5-inch squares. And this is bolded here because it's a little bit different size than we've used before. We used 5-inch last month, and we're using it again this month, but our previous blocks have all used a slightly smaller square. So I just wanted you to note that this is just a little bit bigger block, or a little bit bigger piece. And for fabrics B and C, you're going to need 4 4-inch squares, and each one of those squares is going to be cut in half diagonally for the corner pieces, giving you a total of 8 of each color. So 1 for fabric B, 8 for fabric B, and 8 for fabric C. Now the quantities that we've been discussing, they make all 4 blocks for this month's project. If you want to see the complete total fabric list, you want to see the info guide that we included in the November 2015 download. So before we get started embroidering, I just want to let you know a couple things. Mainly that the color changes in this design are there primarily to make the machine stop in between all the steps. So that's so that you can take the hoop out of the machine and put your fabric down and put your battings down and all those things. But you don't actually have to change the color, even though your machine is telling you you need to. Again, it's just there to make the machine stop. So you can leave the same color in if you feel like changing the color, however, it won't matter. However, if you have a multi-needle machine, you're going to have to go in and insert what they usually call reserve stop or stop commands, because the way the multi-needle works is it likes to just grab the next color and start stitching, and normally that's a good thing, but in this design that wouldn't work because we need the machine to actually stop. So each one of those machines has a way to go in and tell it that you want to stop when it gets to this color. So we're going to go ahead and start embroidering the design now. The first thing you want to do is load in your Trapunto 7 block of Trapunto block 7 of 12 design into your machine. You want to hoop up a piece of FLORIAN nylon no-show mesh stabilizer. Make sure you get it nice and tight. Attach the hoop to the machine and go ahead and stitch out the first color, which will be the placement line for our base batting. Place the square of batting within the placement lines and then secure the corners of it with embroidery perfection tape. Make sure you get good in the corners because you don't want to stitch over the tape. Go ahead and stitch the next color, which will be the placement line for the fabric. Next, you want to stitch the next color, which is going to be the placement lines for the Trapunto batting. So that's going to be our flower outline that you see there. And next, you want to place 3 squares of the polyester batting over the placement stitches. So make sure they're all good and covered. And then you want to cover all 3 of those with a 6-inch square of water-soluble topping. You want to secure the corners of that topping with the embroidery perfection tape, and you want to stretch the topping as tight as you can. And we're doing this and we're using the topping primarily to squish those 3 layers of batting down so that they don't get hung up in your presser foot, and to give the machine a flatter surface to glide over, again, so we don't shift that batting around when we're stitching. So this is kind of an important step. Next, you want to switch to the cotton thread for the top, and like I said earlier, this is optional, and you stitch that down, and this is going to tack down the batting. You want to remove the hoop from the machine, tear away the topping, and using the heat craft tool, you want to carefully melt away the batting from the outside of the stitching, and then go ahead and remove the excess batting and the tape. I'm going to show you a picture of this coming up on the next slide. Before we get there, though, as you're moving this tool through the batting, it should glide right through the batting and just almost magically make a line there where you can just remove the excess batting. It's so much easier than cutting. But the tool goes through the batting when it's nice and hot. It glides really easily. But if you feel it start tugging, you want to stop, take the tool out, let the tool heat back up because it's tugging because it's cooled down a bit, and go ahead and let it heat back up and then resume where you left off. So that's just a little tip. Now here's a picture of what it looks like. Now this is a picture from a previous block that we did last year, but the concept is the same. You want to use that fine point on the heat craft tool and just glide along the edge of the thread there, and the batting will magically just come away, and then you can remove the excess. It's really a cool technique. Next, what you want to do is take your fabric A and center it so that it covers the placement lines right side up, and you want to secure the corners with embroidery perfection tape. Now, just like we did with the topping, you want to stretch this fabric as tight as you can. Don't stretch it out of shape, but just stretch it good and tight, again, so we mat that batting down temporarily so we have an easier surface to stitch over. Now this will be a little easier because we removed a lot of it. But now what we want to do is we want to change the thread to go with the fabric. We want to stitch the next color to secure the fabric down. Once you've done that, you want to remove the tape from the fabric. Then you want to stitch out the next color for the stippling rather, and the next color after that for the flower outline. You want to use the same color you can. If you want to use contrasting colors, again, that's up to you. But when you're done, you'll have a nice tight pattern like you see here, which is going to mat down our base batting real nice and thin, and we're going to have a nice set of bean stitches here to give us a nice outline of our flower, and that will be a great trapunto effect when you're done. You're just going to be amazed at how cool this looks. And then next what you want to do is place your fabric B triangles along the fabric placement lines, right sides down on the center of the fabric, so facing in towards the center like you can see here, and then stitch the next two colors to tack down those triangles. Take the hoop out and press open the two corner triangles, and once you're there, then go ahead and put the next two corner triangles along the placement lines, right sides down on the center of the fabric. Stitch the next two colors to tack those down. Go ahead and press open those two corner triangles. Now you want to make sure you remove any remaining tape, and it's probably going to be hidden under all the fabric, so make sure you take it off. Change the top thread to the color that you intend for the quilting stitches if you want it to be a different color. And then go ahead and stitch out the next color for the quilting stitches. So that's going to be in our corners there. And then the next color is going to stitch out our guidelines, which is going to show us where to trim and seam our blocks together. Remove the block from the hoop and then trim the block to 6 inches square. And the easiest way to do that is with one of the transparent quilting rulers, and use those guidelines that we just stitched as a guide to make sure your block gets centered under that 6-inch ruler. And then you want to repeat the entire sequence 3 more times to make a total of 4 complete blocks. And that ends the project for this month. We want to thank everybody for attending. We hope you will use this video along with the print PDF instructions to recreate the project at home. Be sure and come back next month for the next installment of the series. And we want to remind you to post your blocks and your progress on the FLORIAN Embroidery Facebook page, because at the end of this entire project, we're going to be giving out some awards to people who have the nicest looking blocks and the best looking quilts at the end of the project. So be sure to, when you're done with your blocks, post them on that FLORIAN Embroidery Facebook page. And normally I would turn it back over to DJ, and he would have some closing remarks. And we would probably also show you some of your block progress that you've done from the prior months. But because we're having some technical difficulties in Knoxville today, we're not going to be able to do that today. So I apologize for that, but we'll get back on it next month and have a normal ending. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and be sure and come back next month. And again, thank you everybody for attending.